In general, we have structured our system under the expectation that everybody, if they work hard, can earn a decent wage. But that need not be the case. Even in a wealthy society, you can have individuals who possess a set of capabilities that just don't command a high market wage. Their skills are not scarce enough. My name is David Autor. I'm a professor of economics at MIT. I'm a labor economist. The question I'm trying to understand is how trade and technology affect jobs. In the ideal world, you would say, well, let's imagine two US economies, right? And in one of them we introduce trade and one we don't. One we introduce technology and one we don't. And another one we introduce both. And another one we introduce neither, right? And we could just compare them. Now, in reality, we can't do that kind of thing. We only have one US economy. We could compare lots of other economies, but they're so different from one another, it's very difficult to make a meaningful comparison. So instead we decided we'll look within the US economy and we'll look across local labor markets, what are called commuting zones, which are clusters of US counties where most people live and work and they can commute within them. So there are 722 of those. We want to look at the exposure of each of those commuting zones to both the forces of computerization and globalization. So for thinking about the impact of trade, we can say, well, let's compare Pittsburgh and Raleigh because both of them are manufacturing intensive, not super highly educated, many ways comparable. Pittsburgh is kind of an old steel area. In fact, a lot of the wealth, it's in those Rust Belt industries. Raleigh and the surrounding area is in a lot of labor-intensive, lower value-added industries like apparel, textiles, furniture, leather, rubber goods. China's comparative advantage has been rising in labor-intensive activities, like the stuff done in Raleigh, much more than done in Pittsburgh. And then the other comparison we're making is around exposure to computerization. Actually, Florida would be a good example. Relatively high skilled, relatively high educated. However, much more of the work in Florida is in tourism, right, and services. Whereas if you look at a place like Detroit, much more of the employment is in clerical, administrative support, and also production work. Those are kind of the inputs into a lot of manufacturing, but also into a lot of insurance and finance and so on. Detroit is going to experience much more of this computerization than is Florida because there's much more opportunity for machine substitution. So again, we can ask, as computers become cheaper and these routine intensive jobs are displaced by machinery, that's going to have a much larger effect in a place like Detroit, which is doing more of these things, than a place like Florida, which to a much smaller degree was engaged in those activities that are going to be automated. In the period we study, which is 1980 through 2007, trade has very diffuse benefits and relatively concentrated costs. Those are greater among less educated workers, so greater among non-college than college, but they affect employment across the board, and they affect employment across different occupations as well. So there's a lot of what you might call frictional unemployment. People exiting the labor force and not re-entering quickly, going on disability benefits, retiring earlier. Those suggest that the costs are even greater than simply the earnings losses that would occur just if the demand for your skills is lowered, but also all the costs associated with unemployment. So on the technology side, we do not find really detectable declines in employment. What we do see is a lot of reallocation of people moving out of production and clerical, administrative support jobs and into both professional technical jobs, great news, and also into these service activities. And so we see much more of a change in the occupational distribution of polarization. So trade and technology should not be used synonymously. It's kind of one of the bottom lines of this analysis. They're both having effects. The effects are different. The timing is different. The industries and occupations are different. Even the locations are different. On the one hand, these things create aggregate wealth. We can access world markets and products. And things that we produce well, we can sell to the rest of the world as well. In the long run, this moves us to a setting where the quality of life in general improves across the board. Neither technology or trade are making everybody better off at once. We can think both in the short run about helping people change jobs, change careers through both skills training, but also various types of social insurance that ease that transition. In the longer run, we can think about making appropriate educational investments that give people skills that hopefully will be durable, that will last them throughout their careers. There's never certainty about that. These things are always changing. The dynamism is beneficial in a way, but it does create these very substantial costs for significant groups of individuals.